company that makes Oreos, obviously. And so they know that they already have like the biggest consumer base they need. I mean, they don't really need to market to sell Oreos. We know Oreos are great. We all want Oreos except for Chris. Everybody wants an Oreo. So they started this new ad campaign, which I think is actually rather genius. And actually, it's really kind of cool. Their new ad campaign, which this is the first commercial that they've run with this new campaign, is a bunch of different ads all about buying Oreos to give to other people. It's all about what if I were to buy some Oreos and give them to somebody else? But how would it improve their day? Would it make them more pleasant? Would it make them have a better time? Maybe they're having a difficult day or having difficulties in life. You know, maybe if I bought them an Oreo, it would change things. You know, the video was all about the big bad wolf and like the vampires and sharks who eat big seals. You know, if I just gave Oreos, everything, you know, maybe it would work out better. And there's a commercial that talks about like if I went through high school, I went through my school and gave Oreos to my friends, would it have helped them have a more optimistic day? It literally says that in the commercial. Or there's one, or a little girl, and this one like made me like well up with tears. Because maybe think of Charlotte. There's this little girl, she's like 4 or 5 years old, and she just says, what if I were to give my dad an Oreo before he tells me I have to go to bed? Maybe he would let me stay up, we could play, and you know, have a puppet show and all this stuff. And there's a beautiful series of commercials they're doing. And I think it's just genius because again, like I said, everybody buys Oreos for themselves. We all know. I mean, most commercials tell us why we should buy something for ourselves. Most commercials say you need this to make your life better. But Nabisco's figured out, everybody knows Oreos make life better. Let's just help them make other people's lives better. Which I think is just cute and genius. But ironically, at the same time as this new ad campaign's been like picking up steam online, and I first saw this commercial on Facebook as it's kind of been picking up. At the same time, I don't know if you saw it in the news, but Oreo is under a bit of scrutiny right now. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's been on national news. It's made all the, made the Associated Press and all the major news outlets. But Nabisco is actually under a bit of scrutiny for potentially being a little less than honest about what is in the Oreo cookies. I don't know if you heard this, but there's a high school math teacher in upstate New York who gave his students an assignment. He thought it would just be an easy way to help them learn a mathematical equation. He wanted his students to learn how to measure something that they couldn't separate. They wanted, you know how sometimes things just don't come apart. You want to know how much one quantity is of something versus another. Well, he taught them how to do that with Oreos. Because nobody can like twist an Oreo and get the cream on no side of the cookie. Like we can twist it and get it on one side but not the other. So he wanted the students to figure out how to measure how much cream is in an Oreo cookie. And in addition to that, he wanted them to know to measure how much cream is inside the double stuffed Oreos and also inside the mega stuffed Oreos, which I didn't even know existed. It's the triple stuff. Yeah, it's crazy. He wanted the students to measure the quantity of cream within all the Oreos without being able to separate it all and measuring it on its own. He says the report says the results were shocking. The students discovered that those cookies we love so much aren't all they're stuffed up to be. Is this double stuffed? Not really. Try 1.86 times the stuff of regular Oreos. How about that? Mega stuff, which is supposed to be their triple stuffed product, try again. How about 2.68 times the stuff? The teacher says we were surprised, and apparently it came as a surprise to the folks at Oreo too. An Oreo spokeswoman said, "While I'm not familiar with what was done in the classroom setting, I can confirm for you that our recipe for your Oreo double stuffed cookie has double the stuff or cream filling when compared to our base original Oreo cookie." So now, all of a sudden, we've got this controversy. I saw it in the news the other day, and as far as I can tell, there hasn't been any class action lawsuits filed. Nobody, although I'm sure there's some lawyer out there just drooling at the opportunity to make some money on this false advertising lawsuit. Did you know that Subway was sued? Did you hear that? Subway was sued for their footlongs. They're actually 11 inches, not foot long. Yeah. So someone out there thinking they're going to do the same thing with Oreo. But at the very least, even if there's no lawsuit going on, this isn't good PR for America's favorite cookie. You know, Oreo is just trying to get people to buy cookies and share the love with other people. They just want to put smiles on people's faces. Oreo just wants to help people have a great day. And now they've got this negative PR going on, where people are accusing them of false advertising. It's sad. It's sad because I think it's an illustration for how we go through life on a daily basis. We can't simply live happily ever after. Life cannot run smoothly for us. Most of us just want to live in peace and harmony and just enjoy life. But we are like moths to the flames of drama, aren't we? We really love drama. We have this thing where we just need conflict in our lives, most of us do. We sniff it out like a controversial sniffing dog. We assume the worst in people. We gossip about other shortcomings rather than helping them deal with it. We embellish the truth to make stories juicier, and all the while hurting somebody's reputation. We hold on to the past until it causes us a nervous breakdown. We are sick for drama. We love controversy. We need conflict. We have this unnatural desire, this innate desire for conflict and controversy in life. The good news is that we're not the only ones who've dealt with this kind of dysfunction. We're far from being the first generation who've just been prone to drama and prone to controversy. We're far from being the first generation to deal with an overcomplicated life of drama and tension. The Israelites were only too eager to overreact in dramatic fashion, time and time again. The Israelites were only too quick to make life incredibly complicated for themselves. And this is exactly what happens in the story we're going to read from this morning in the latter portions of the book of Joshua. We're going to be looking at Joshua chapter 22. And throughout these latter chapters of Joshua, the writer spells out for us how Joshua and the leaders of Israel partitioned off the various plots of land for each one of the tribes of Israel. The nation of Israel finally has peace. The land of Canaan is rested from war. There's no tension, there's no enemies for them to confront. So each of the tribes and each of the clans within those tribes received an allotment of land within the land of Canaan, within the promised land, receiving their inheritance from God. But the land promised to the tribes of Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh were on the other side of the Jordan. So eventually they were released to go take that and inhabit that land. Again, Canaan had been conquered. There was peace and rest in the land. From all accounts, this should be a simple, smooth, happy ever after ending. This should be no problem whatsoever. But what fun would that be? So let's pick up with Joshua chapter 22, beginning in verse 10. The writer says, while they were still in Canaan, when they came to a place called Gilead, near the Jordan River, the men of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh stopped to build a large and imposing altar. The rest of Israel heard that the people of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh had built an altar at Gilead at the edge of the land of Canaan, on the west side of the Jordan River. So the whole community of Israel gathered at Shiloh and prepared to go to war against them. Let's reflect on this fact for a minute. Let's just think about this. Here we have the 12 tribes of Israel. We've talked throughout this entire series with the book of Joshua that the 12 tribes of Israel have been fighting together and surviving together for over 450 years. That's a conservative estimate for how long they were slaves in Egypt. They were wandering through the desert and then conquered the land of Canaan. For 450 years, these guys have been melding together, forging their relationship together as one united nation. These 12 tribes, all these clans within these 12 tribes have been uniting, supporting one another, fighting for one another, dying next to one another. By all accounts, these guys should be one. They should be a single united nation. There should be no division among them. They should know their purpose in life. They should know who they are and their relationship with one another. There should be no tension, no conflict. But here, in the latter portions of the book of Joshua, we find the 9.5 tribes of Israel, the 9.5 tribes living on the western side of the Jordan River, because of a small little hiccup, because of this little altar that the eastern tribes decided to build, the 2.5 tribes that live east of the Jordan River, decide out of the blue they're going to go to war with one another. They're going to bust out into a civil war after all they've been through because the eastern tribe built an altar. It seems quite extreme to me. It seems like it's a little bit of an irrational judgment on an otherwise minor issue. Go to war with your friends, go to war with your cousins, go to war with your brothers and your sisters over an altar. Over an altar. We can sit here and scrutinize the Israelites for rushing to judgment. We can judge them ourselves for their seemingly irrational response to a relatively minor issue. But the truth is, if we're honest with ourselves, we do the same thing on a regular basis. We are just as bad as the Israelites when it comes to rushing to judgment and determining we're just going to break out into a civil war with one another over relatively minor issues. No matter how long we've been followers of Jesus, no matter how long we've been part of this church, no matter how much we've been through both good times and bad, supporting one another when we've needed one another, celebrating together when things have been great, no matter how much we've been through thick and thin as part of the church, as Christians, as believers, we can be some of the most irrational, judgmental, and dramatic people in the world. The people of the church are oftentimes the most irrational people, the most judgmental people to have to deal with on a daily basis. There are some of us who feed off of conflict, who just need it like a drug, who, if we don't have conflict in our lives, we will seek it out. Or if we can't seek it out, we'll actually make it if we need to. There are some of us who just live off this idea of conflict and drama in our lives. The wonderful thing about the story of Joshua chapter 22, as we're going to read through the rest of the story, is that the story gives us 4 distinct disciplines that we need to apply in the church, and we need to apply as human beings in society, whether it means we're, students going back to school, or employees going back to work on Monday, or whomever we are, just as human beings in our communities, in society, there are 4 disciplines that the Israelites give us in Joshua, the rest of Joshua chapter 22, that if we apply them, we will instantly find our lives less dramatic, less full of tension, and more at peace with the world around us. So as we read through the rest of this chapter, Joshua 22, we're going to highlight 4 disciplines, and we're going to try to do so as quickly as we can moving through. The first discipline that we need to learn to apply when it comes to dealing with conflict in our lives is to offer grace. Off the top, the very first thing we do, before we rush to judgment, before we simply assume the worst about somebody, we must be people of grace. We must give people a chance. We need to let people hear our concerns, and we need to give them a chance to explain themselves if that is necessary. We need to clear the air, and we need to offer grace, first and foremost. After learning that they had built an illegal altar, the western tribes of Israel were clamoring for war. We can read in the text that they had torches and pitchforks in hand. The people of the western tribes of Israel were ready to march. They were ready to go to war, to break out a civil war against their brothers on the eastern side of the Jordan. They saw an act of rebellion, and they believed there was a price to pay for their treachery. Thankfully, though, the leaders of Israel practiced this first discipline of offering grace. Let's read about it in Joshua 22, 13 through 19. Before going off to war, the writer says this: first, however, they sent a delegation led by Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, to talk with the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half-tribe Manasseh. In this delegation were 10 leaders of Israel, one from each of the 10 tribes, and each of the head of his family within the clans of Israel. When they arrived in the land of Gilead, they said to the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, "The whole community of the Lord demands to know why you are betraying the God of Israel. How could you turn away from the Lord and build an altar for yourselves in rebellion against him? Was our sin at Peor not enough? To this day we are not fully cleansed of it, even after the plague that struck the entire community. And yet today you are turning away from following the Lord. If you rebel against the Lord today, he will be angry with all of us tomorrow. If you need the altar because the land you possess is defiled, then join us in the Lord's land, where the tabernacle of the Lord is situated, and share our land with us. But do not rebel against the Lord or against us by building an altar, other than the one true altar of the Lord our God." Instead of rushing off to war, instead of just letting the mob just go crazy and attack the eastern tribes of Israel, the leaders of the western tribes had a conversation with the leaders of the eastern tribes. They had a conversation, a little chat with their eastern counterparts. The leaders of Israel had a sincere concern. They were really concerned about the well-being of the eastern tribes. They were afraid that God was going to come down and smite them, was going to just attack them with a plague for their rebellion. In addition to that, they were really concerned about the nation as a whole. We're a united people. God sees us as one nation. If you rebel against God, he's going to view that as if we're all rebelling against God. Later on in the text, the portion we didn't read, reminds us of the sin of Achan. And you remember that story from earlier in Joshua. When Achan, one man, sinned against God, his entire family suffered. And his entire nation suffered as a result of his sin. So the Israelites are very deeply concerned. But instead of just rushing off to war, instead of just assuming the worst and just casting judgment on the eastern tribes, the leaders of the western tribes practiced what Jesus would eventually instruct his disciples to do in Matthew chapter 18. Jesus says, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. Just go deal with it one-on-one. Be a people of grace. Go to that person directly. Chat with them about it. Talk about your concern. Express them to them honestly, openly. Clear the air. Offer grace. We need to be people of grace. Instead of writing about what someone else is doing on Facebook, instead of talking about it endlessly with our family and friends and letting rumors just spill over and spill over and spill over, we need to be people who just go to somebody directly when we have somebody offend us. Or when somebody's doing something that we're concerned about. Maybe we're concerned that someone's living a life of sin, or that their life is falling apart because of some bad decisions they're making. Instead of just talking about it, and even instead of just praying about it, go and talk to them personally. Be that person of grace. And love them. Show them how much you love them and build up the courage to go talk to them personally, one-on-one. Most conflicts are unnecessarily overblown because we fail to do this one thing. We fail to discuss our concerns with the person one-on-one. That's simply that. I believe 95% of all conflicts would be resolved if we did this one thing. We just went and talked to the person. Instead of dealing with it in gossip or dealing with it with somebody else, go directly to the source. The first discipline is to offer grace. The second discipline is just as important. The second discipline is to respond with grace. If and when someone approaches you or me with a concern, if conflict is coming to us, in order to prevent drama, in order to promote peace in our lives, we need to be people who respond with grace, just as much as we offer. Let's read Joshua 22, verses 21 to 23. The people of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh answered the heads of the clan of Israel. The Lord, the mighty one, is God. The Lord, the mighty one, is God. He knows the truth, and may Israel know it too. We have not built the altar in treacherous rebellion against the Lord. If we had done so, do not spare our lives this day. If we have built an altar for ourselves to turn away from the Lord, or to offer burnt offerings, or grain offerings, or peace offerings, may the Lord himself punish us. The eastern tribes had every reason in the world to blow this thing into a huge fight. They had just been accused of sinning against their friends, their brothers and their sisters, their cousins, their fellow Israelites. The western tribes had just accused them of not knowing the law, the Mosaic law that they've been talking about for hundreds of years at this point. These people were just accused of something that would seem unthinkable to us if we lived in that day. And so if anybody had a reason to kind of rush off and declare war themselves, it's the eastern tribes. The eastern tribes had all the reason in the world to get upset. But the eastern tribes responded graciously, simply by explaining themselves, saying, "Look, all right, okay, I see where you could be misunderstanding what we're doing. I see that. Let me assure you that what I'm doing is not sinful. Let me assure you that what we're doing is not rebellious. Let me assure you that we're still living fully in adherence with the Mosaic law, that we are going to worship God at the tabernacle at Shiloh. Let me assure you that we trust God, that we love God, the one God who's the God over Israel, over all of us." There's nothing more frustrating than a person who cannot handle a little constructive criticism. The eastern tribes could have just blown this thing up. They could have just gone crazy. But they didn't. They heard the criticism, they heard the concern, they responded appropriately. But more often than not, whether it be in a counseling situation or just a private conversation, every pastor, every elder, every church leader at some point has had a conversation, a hard conversation with somebody, in which that person just simply will not hear the constructive criticism from the person, or not hear the heartfelt concerns for themselves. Many times when someone asks me to talk to somebody about something, many times when I see something going on and I need to talk to somebody about it, the response is not all that great. A lot of times it just kind of blows up, and it's hard. Because when somebody builds up the courage and expresses and realizes that they love somebody so much that they have to help them, they have to do whatever it takes to help them whatever they're going through. To have that person respond to you just with anger or with or just frustration and just kind of walk away from you and kind of casting off your relationship and just, casting you off altogether. It hurts. It breaks your heart because you want what's best for that person. You want to love them. You want to help them to be loved by God as fully as they can. You want them to help them reflect Jesus in all the ways that they possibly can in their lives. And yet, sometimes some people just cannot hear constructive criticism or hear somebody else's concern. And that's why I think all of us need to be able to apply this discipline. We need to respond with grace. When somebody offers us grace, we have to understand the fact that it took a lot for that person to come to us. It took a lot of courage, a lot of faith, a lot of love for somebody to come to us with a heartfelt concern. Truly, it took a lot. And we need to be able, any of us, whether it's me or you or anybody else, we need to learn to respond to that kind of courage, to that kind of love with grace ourselves. We need to be able to hear it and respond appropriately. Maybe it's a complete misunderstanding, and that's perfectly fine, as this story seems to be. But maybe there is something going on. But that person, whoever's coming to you, wants to help you. And it's our job to let them. As our brothers or our sisters in Christ, that's what they're there for, to help us to grow. So let's do that. Let's respond with grace. So we need to begin by offering grace. The second discipline is to respond with grace. The third discipline we learn from the story in Joshua chapter 22 is to entertain truth alone. Entertain truth alone. If you've had a conversation with somebody that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt is just being dishonest. If you're in a conversation with somebody where you just know that they're not being honest with themselves, they're not being honest with you, whether it's a small thing or a big thing, they're just totally lying. There's nothing more destructive to a relationship than dishonesty. There's absolutely nothing that will destroy a relationship, no matter how strong it is, no matter how wonderful or how long that relationship's been together, no matter how beautiful of a story you've had as friends, or maybe husband and wife, or maybe just brothers and sisters in Christ, no matter how strong that relationship has been, a simple white lie or just a little bit of dishonesty can destroy it completely. 100% destroy it. That's why the third discipline to overcoming conflict and promoting peace in our lives is to entertain truth alone. Let's continue reading from Joshua chapter 22. The Israelites from the eastern tribes continue on with their response, and they say this: the truth is, we've built this altar because we fear that in the future your descendants will say to ours, what right do you have to worship the Lord, the God of Israel? The Lord has placed the Jordan River as a barrier between our people and you people of Reuben and Gad. You have no claim to the Lord. So your descendants may prevent our descendants from worshiping the Lord. So we decided to build the altar not for burnt offerings or sacrifices, but as a memorial. It will remind our descendants and your descendants that we too have the right to worship the Lord at this sanctuary with our burnt offerings, sacrifices, and peace offerings. Then your descendants will not be able to say to ours, you have no claim to the Lord. That probably wasn't the easiest thing to say for the Eastern tribe leaders, the leaders of the Eastern tribes. They were telling them, look, we are frightened that in the future, we will not be as close to one another as we are right now. We're afraid that generations to come, we will be a divided people. And so we felt the need to just build something, to build a memorial of some sort that would remind all of our generations, all of our ancestors, that we are indeed one people. And that we all indeed, whether we live on the eastern side or the western side, all have access to the Lord, the one Lord, the God of Israel. And so the Eastern tribe leaders explain this, and they have to be honest. They could have just blown it off, say, okay, we're sorry, we'll just tear it down, whatever. They could have just blown it off and said it was no big deal. But the fact is that they knew that there was a true concern here. So they entertained truth. They said, look, this is where we are. This is who we are. This is what we're afraid of. Can you work with us on this? They explained how they truly felt. And thankfully, in this case, being honest and being true was simply to explain misunderstanding. Thankfully, it wasn't that they had to deal with, rebellious Eastern tribes. They didn't have to deal with, the Eastern tribes breaking the law. They just had to explain a misunderstanding, as difficult as that was. But often the case is that when we have to talk to somebody because of a concern we have, when we have to confront somebody with something they have going on in their lives, oftentimes there is something happening. Oftentimes there is some kind of a sin happening in their lives. Maybe oftentimes there is some sort of drama that we need to help them get over. And so that's why it's important that we entertain this, or we keep in mind this discipline, this third discipline, to entertain truth alone, that we be honest with one another. That we just say, look, yeah, I'm struggling. It's hard for me to tell you this, but I'm dealing with sin X, Y, Z, whatever it may be. And I can use your help in overcoming. And as the person doing doing the confrontation or expressing the concern, you need to be as concerned with entertaining the truth alone as well. Don't embellish the story. Don't tell them, oh, I saw you, I know what you're up to, I know what you're doing. Just be honest. Okay, I'm concerned about this. Here's the reason I'm concerned about it. They don't need to go into what you think might be happening. Just be truthful. And just say, these are the facts. This is why I'm concerned. And let the other party go take it from there. James puts it this way in James chapter 5. Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. When we read the scripture, we often emphasize to pray with each other. We like that part. We like to pray together. But more often than not, healing has to start with a confession. That's why we have a community of faith. That's why we have the church. Because we need each other. We need to support one another. We need to confess what's going on in our lives. We need to be open and honest with one another so that we can be healed. Prayer is a huge part of it, but so is confession. It's a 50-50 thing here, and we have to do both. Praying is for one another is just not enough. We need to confess to one another as well. All right, so 3 disciplines so far. We have offer grace, respond with grace, entertain truth alone, and finally, our 4th discipline we learned from Joshua 22 is to just omit hard feelings. Omit hard feelings. Let's finish up by reading the latter portion of chapter 22. When Phinehas the priest and the leaders of the community, the heads of the clans of Israel, heard this, that being the story from the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half-tribe Manasseh, they were satisfied. Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, replied to them, "Today we know the Lord is among us because we have not committed this treachery against the Lord as we thought." Or you have not committed this treachery against the Lord as we thought. Instead, you have rescued Israel from being destroyed by the hand of the Lord. Then Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, and the other leaders left the tribes of Reuben and Gad and Gilead and returned to the land of Canaan to tell the Israelites what had happened. And all the Israelites were satisfied and praised God and spoke no more of war against Reuben and Gad. The people of Reuben and Gad named the altar Witness, for they said, "It is a witness between us and them, that the Lord is our God." If anyone in the story had a reason to hold a grudge, it's the Israelites, the eastern tribes of Israel. They had a reason to hold a grudge. These people accused us of doing something we didn't do. They should have known them. They should have known who we were. We've been their brothers and sisters for 450 years. We've been through thick and thin with them. For multiple generations we've been together. How dare they accuse us of rebelling against God? They had a reason to hold a grudge. But from all accounts of the story, it's over. It's done. They dealt with the problem. They worked through it. They got a satisfactory answer. And they're united once again. As simple as that. No hard feelings. Let's just move on. Omit the hard feelings. When we're confronted with a potential conflict, whether we approach someone with grace or someone approaches us with grace over a concern, we must remember that the whole thing is for our own best interest. If we're dealing with a brother or sister in Christ, the chances are they have our best interest in mind. They want us to be a better human being. They want us to further reflect Jesus in our lives. If we're being approached with grace and truth, it's because the person loves us and wants to help us be a better disciple, a better person in this world. So we need to figure out a way to omit those hard feelings. Just forget about it. Move on. And love the person for what they've done for you. Love that they had the courage to talk to you. Love that God had convicted them of the necessary, it being necessary to talk to you. Omit the hard feelings. It's over. It's done with. We grow together. We heal through it. We become closer to Christ as a result of it. And we can just forget about the hard feelings. Omit the hard feelings. So our 4 disciplines we learned from Joshua chapter 22 are this. Offer grace. Respond with grace. Entertain truth alone. And omit hard feelings. I realized as I was working on this message and I was really trying to figure out how the best way to communicate what I felt was the heart of the story of Joshua 22, I realized that these 4 disciplines are a lot to remember. There's a lot in there, it's not just one word here, one word there. It's entire lives. It's difficult. You kind of struggle with what's going on here. How do we remember this? How do we remember this information? Well, I realized while I was writing this, God did something amazing. He showed me that there's actually another word in here. Oreos. is by sharing Oreos together. So this morning, as the song said, I want to give you an Oreo. But this morning, I don't want to just give you an Oreo because it's tasty and it's fun and it's good. This morning, I want to give you an Oreo as a reminder of how much this message can change our lives. What we're going to do this morning as we do the message, Eli and Trevor are going to share some Oreos with you. And while they're sharing the Oreos with you, I've got a bunch in the basket here. If there's not enough, I have more. We're going to watch the video again. But this time, I want you to watch the video, and as he talks about the Oreo, I want you to think about these disciplines. What if I were to offer grace to somebody? What if I were to respond to grace? What if I were to entertain truth alone? What if I were to admit hard feelings? How would it change the story in the end? Go ahead, guys. You can pass us some Oreos. After the video's done, we'll break.